Good evening, beautiful souls. Look around you right now. Look at the person sitting next to you, behind you, in front of you. What do you see? I'll tell you what I see. I see power. I see potential. I see the future leaders, innovators, and change makers of this world. But more importantly, I see women and girls who have the capacity to rewrite the rules of what it means to be strong in a world that often tells us we're not enough. Just yesterday, a young girl came up to me at the airport. She couldn't have been more than 16 years old, and she looked at me with these incredibly bright eyes and said, "Priyanka, I want to be strong like you, but I don't know how." And that question, that beautiful, honest question, is exactly why we're here tonight. Strength isn't something you're born with. It's something you build, brick by brick, choice by choice, day by day. And tonight I'm going to share with you the 5 rules that transformed a small town girl from barely into someone who could stand on global stages, who could challenge Hollywood stereotypes, who could build businesses, and who could use her voice to create change. But before we dive in, I want you to do something for me. I want you to close your eyes for just a moment. Go ahead, close them. Now, think about that dream that's been sitting in your heart. Maybe it's to start your own business. Maybe it's to become a doctor. Maybe it's to travel the world. Maybe it's to stand up to someone who's been putting you down. Feel that dream. It's real, isn't it? It's powerful. Now open your eyes, because tonight we're going to turn that dream into your reality. The first rule I want to share with you is this: own your story before anyone else writes it for you. When I was 13 years old, I was sent to America as an exchange student. Imagine this: a girl from a small Indian city thrown into the hallways of an American high school in Iowa. The culture shock was overwhelming. I was different in every way possible: the way I looked, the way I spoke, the food I ate, the traditions I followed. And kids, as kids often do, they noticed. I remember walking into the cafeteria on my first day, holding my tray of food, looking for somewhere to sit. The whispers started immediately. Who is she? She's so different. Look at her clothes. And in that moment, I had a choice. I could let their whispers become my story, or I could own my narrative. You see, every single day, people are going to try to put you in a box. They're going to try to tell you what you cannot do based on where you come from, what you look like, what your background is, how much money your family has. But here's what I learned in that cafeteria in Iowa: their limitation is not your truth. I walked up to the first table I saw and I said, "Hi, I'm Priyanka. I'm from India, and I'd love to sit with you guys and maybe teach you some Hindi words if you're interested." Instead of hiding who I was, I led with it. I made my difference my strength. Fast forward 25 years later, and I'm still doing the same thing. When I walked into Hollywood, they said, "We don't know how to cast you. You're not American enough for American roles. You're too American now for Indian roles." Instead of trying to fit into their boxes, I created my own. I became a producer. I started my own production company. I began telling the stories I wanted to tell in the way I wanted to tell them. This is what owning your story looks like. It's refusing to let other people's limited imagination define your unlimited potential. But owning your story isn't just about the big moments. It's about the small, everyday moments too. It's about walking into a room and introducing yourself with confidence. It's about speaking up in meetings when you have an idea. It's about wearing what makes you feel powerful, not what makes others comfortable. It's about being proud of your accent, your heritage, your unique perspective. I think about Malala Yousafzai, who at 15 years old owned her story so powerfully that she changed the conversation about girls' education worldwide. She didn't wait for permission to speak. She didn't wait for someone else to validate her voice. She owned her truth and she shared it with the world. Or consider Oprah Winfrey, who grew up in poverty, faced discrimination, and was told she was too emotional for television. Instead of changing who she was, she owned her emotiveness, her empathy, her ability to connect with people, and she built a media empire on those very qualities that others said were weaknesses. Here's the thing about owning your story: it's not always easy. There will be days when you doubt yourself. There will be people who try to make you feel small. There will be moments when you want to shrink back and blend in. But in those moments, I want you to remember this: your story is your power. Your experiences, even the difficult ones, especially the difficult ones, they're not obstacles, they're advantages. They give you perspective. They give you resilience. They give you the ability to connect with others who have faced similar challenges. When I was 15, I came back to India after my time in America, and suddenly I felt like I didn't belong anywhere. I was too American for India, too Indian for America. But instead of seeing this as a problem, I eventually learned to see it as my superpower. I could bridge cultures. I could help people understand each other. I could bring stories from one part of the world to another. So, rule number 1, own your story. Write your own narrative. Don't wait for permission to be who you are. Don't try to fit into boxes that were never meant for someone as extraordinary as you. Now, let's talk about rule number 2, fail forward, not backward. I want to tell you about the worst day of my life. Well, one of them anyway. It was 2003, and I had just finished filming what I thought was going to be my breakthrough movie. I was so excited. I had worked so hard. I had prepared for months. I had given everything I had to that role. And when the movie came out, it was a complete disaster. The critics tore it apart. The audiences stayed away. It was a massive flop. I remember sitting in my apartment in Mumbai, reading review after review, each one more devastating than the last. I felt like a failure. I felt like maybe everyone was right. Maybe I wasn't cut out for this industry. Maybe I should just give up and go back to the original plan of becoming an engineer. But then something happened. My mother sat down next to me and she said something that changed my perspective forever. She said, "Beta, failure is not the opposite of success. Failure is the stepping stone to success. The question is not whether you will fail, you will. The question is what you will do with that failure." And that's when I learned one of the most important lessons of my life. There's no such thing as failure. There are only lessons and redirections. See, most of us are taught to fear failure from a very young age. We're told that failure is bad, that we should avoid it at all costs, that it's something to be ashamed of. But what if I told you that every single successful person you admire has failed more times than you've even tried? J.K. Rowling was rejected by 12 publishers before Harry Potter was accepted. Walt Disney was fired from a newspaper for lacking imagination and having no good ideas. Steven Spielberg was rejected from film school 3 times. Oprah was told she was unfit for television news. But here's what they all had in common: they failed forward. They used their failures as information, not as confirmation of their inadequacy. When that movie flopped, I could have failed backward. I could have let it confirm my worst fears about myself. I could have given up, retreated, played it safe from then on. Instead, I chose to fail forward. I asked myself, what can I learn from this? What would I do differently next time? How can this experience make me better? And you know what I learned? I learned that I had been trying to be what I thought the industry wanted instead of being authentically myself. I learned that I needed to choose projects that aligned with my values, not just projects that seemed commercial. I learned that I needed to trust my instincts more and other people's opinions less. That failure led me to take on more challenging, meaningful roles. It led me to Fashion, a film that tackled serious social issues. It led me to Seven Kun Math, where I played a completely unconventional character. And eventually, it led me to take the biggest risk of my career, moving to Hollywood and starting all over again. Failing forward means reframing failure from being a verdict to being a teacher. It means getting curious about your failures instead of getting crushed by them. I think about Serena Williams, who has lost matches throughout her career, but has used each loss to come back stronger, to analyze her game, to push herself to new levels of excellence. She doesn't let a loss define her, she lets it refine her. Or consider Sarah Blakely, the founder of Spanx, who was rejected by numerous manufacturers and investors before building a billion-dollar company. She talks about how her father used to ask her and her brother at dinner every night, "What did you fail at today?" He was teaching them that failure was not something to fear, but something to learn from. Here's what I want you to understand. Every failure contains within it the seeds of your next success. But you have to be willing to plant those seeds. You have to be willing to dig deep, to examine what went wrong and to make adjustments. When I first started auditioning in Hollywood, I was rejected constantly. I was told I was too ethnic for some roles, not ethnic enough for others, too tall, too short, too exotic, not exotic enough, you name it, I heard it. Each rejection stung, but I started keeping a journal of these rejections, not to torture myself, but to look for patterns. What was I hearing? What adjustments could I make? How could I better present myself? That journal became my roadmap. It helped me understand that I needed to stop trying to fit into existing molds and start creating my own opportunities. That's how Quantico happened. That's how my production company happened. That's how I went from being rejected by Hollywood to being celebrated by it. Failing forward also means failing fast. Don't drag out situations that aren't working. Don't stay in relationships, jobs, or projects that are clearly not right for you just because you're afraid of the failure. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for yourself is to cut your losses and redirect your energy towards something that serves you better. And here's the most important part: failing forward means being kind to yourself in the process. It means talking to yourself the way you would talk to your best friend. It means recognizing that failure doesn't make you a failure. It makes you human. It makes you brave. It makes you someone who's actually trying. So rule number 2, fail forward, not backward. Use your failures as fuel. Let them teach you, redirect you, strengthen you. Because on the other side of every failure that you push through is a version of yourself that you've never been before. This brings me to rule number 3, build your village, but be willing to walk alone. One of the most important things I've learned in my journey is that success is never a solo act, but leadership sometimes requires solitude. Let me tell you about my village. When I first moved to Hollywood, I knew no one. And I mean no one. I didn't have family connections. I didn't have industry friends. I didn't have a network. But I knew I needed to build one, not just for my career, but for my sanity, for my growth, for my support. I started saying yes to everything: industry events, coffee meetings, collaborations, even small projects that didn't pay much but allowed me to meet people and build relationships. I approached it strategically but authentically. I wasn't networking just to use people. I was building genuine relationships with people who inspired me, who challenged me, who supported me. My village includes my manager, who believed in me when no one else would. It includes fellow actors who became friends, who would call me when I was feeling isolated and remind me of my worth. It includes writers who helped me understand the industry better. It includes mentors who had walked the path before me and were willing to share their wisdom. But here's what's crucial about building your village: it has to be mutual. You can't just take, you have to give. When other actors were struggling with similar challenges, I would share resources with them. When I learned something valuable, I would pass it on. When someone in my network needed support, I showed up for them. Your village should include different types of people. You need champions, people who believe in you and will advocate for you even when you're not in the room. You need challengers, people who will push you to be better, who will give you honest feedback even when it's hard to hear. You need connectors, people who know lots of other people and can introduce you to opportunities. And you need nurturers, people who will hold space for your emotions, who will remind you of who you are when you forget. I think about Michelle Obama, who talks about the importance of her circle of friends, women who knew her before she was First Lady, who keep her grounded, who celebrate her victories and support her through challenges. She calls them her kitchen table friends, the ones she can be completely herself with. Or consider Reese Witherspoon, who didn't just build a personal village, but created a professional one through her production company, Hello Sunshine, bringing together women storytellers, investing in female-driven content, and lifting up other women in the process. But here's where it gets complicated. Sometimes building your village means being willing to walk alone first. There was a point in my career when I realized that some of the people I thought were part of my village were actually holding me back. They were comfortable with me staying at a certain level because it made them feel better about themselves. They would make subtle comments about my ambitions. They would question my decisions. They would project their limitations onto me. This is one of the hardest realizations you'll face, that sometimes the people closest to you are not equipped to support the person you're becoming. And in those moments, you have to choose between staying small to make others comfortable or growing into who you're meant to be, even if it means walking alone for a while. When I decided to move to Hollywood, many people in my Indian film industry thought I was making a mistake. Why would you leave when you're successful here? They asked. What if it doesn't work out? What if you lose everything? Some of these questions came from people who cared about me, but some came from people who couldn't imagine taking such risks themselves. I had to be willing to walk alone in that decision. I had to trust my vision even when others couldn't see it. I had to believe in myself even when my support system was questioning me. Walking alone doesn't mean being lonely. It means being selective about whose opinions you allow to influence your decisions. It means being strong enough to pursue your path even when others don't understand it. But here's the beautiful thing: when you're willing to walk alone, you often discover who your real village is. The people who support you even when they don't fully understand your choices. The people who celebrate your courage even when they wouldn't make the same decisions themselves. Those are your people. And as you grow and evolve, your village will grow and evolve too. You'll attract new people who are aligned with the person you're becoming. You'll inspire others to take their own brave steps. You'll become someone else's village. I remember when Quantico became successful, suddenly I was hearing from people who hadn't supported my move to Hollywood initially. They were congratulating me. They were proud of me. They wanted to be associated with my success. And while I appreciated their words, I also remembered who had been there during the uncertain times. Your village should celebrate your successes, but more importantly, they should support you through your struggles. They should believe in your dreams even when those dreams seem impossible. They should remind you of your strength when you forget it yourself. And as you build your village, remember to be the kind of person you'd want in your own village. Be generous with your support, honest with your feedback, and reliable with your presence. Sometimes being willing to walk alone also means being willing to change directions when everyone around you thinks you should stay on the same path. It means trusting your intuition even when it goes against popular opinion. It means being brave enough to disappoint some people in order to honor yourself. So, rule number 3, build your village intentionally and authentically, but be willing to walk alone when your growth requires it. Surround yourself with people who see your potential and support your journey, but don't let anyone else's limitations become your own. Now, let's dive into rule number 4, turn your wounds into wisdom. This is perhaps the most personal rule I'm going to share with you tonight. And it's the one that has been the most transformational in my life. We all have wounds. We all have experiences that have hurt us, disappointed us, left scars on our hearts and minds. The question isn't whether you'll be wounded in life. You will. The question is what you'll do with those wounds. Will you let them define you, or will you let them refine you? When I was in high school in America, I experienced racism for the first time in my life. Kids would make comments about my skin color, about my accent, about my culture. They would call me names, exclude me from groups, make jokes at my expense. There were days I would come home and cry, wishing I could just blend in, wishing I could be like everyone else. That experience wounded me deeply. For a long time, I carried anger about it, shame about it. I started to believe that being different was a disadvantage, that my Indian identity was something to minimize rather than celebrate. But as I grew older, I realized I had a choice. I could let that wound make me bitter, or I could let it make me better. I could use that experience to understand what it felt like to be marginalized, to be made to feel other, and I could make sure I never made anyone else feel that way. That wound became wisdom. It taught me empathy. It taught me the importance of inclusion. It taught me to use my platform to speak up for others who might be facing similar challenges. When I started getting roles in Hollywood, I made sure to speak up when I saw diversity issues. When I started my production company, inclusion became one of our core values. The pain I experienced as a teenager being bullied for my ethnicity became the foundation for me to become someone who stands up against discrimination in all its forms. But turning wounds into wisdom isn't just about the big, dramatic wounds. It's about the everyday disappointments, the small betrayals, the moments when life doesn't go according to plan. When I was passed over for roles I really wanted, that wound taught me that rejection is redirection. When I was criticized in the media, that wound taught me the difference between constructive feedback and noise. When relationships didn't work out, those wounds taught me about self-worth and the importance of being with people who see my value. I think about Maya Angelou, who survived childhood trauma and abuse, and turned those experiences into some of the most powerful healing literature of our time. She didn't pretend her wounds didn't exist. She transformed them into wisdom that helped millions of other people heal. Or consider Oprah, who has been open about her own traumatic childhood experiences and has used those experiences to create empathy, understanding, and healing for countless others through her work. The process of turning wounds into wisdom isn't easy, and it's not quick. It requires you to feel the pain fully, to grieve what was lost, to get angry. If you need to get angry, you can't bypass the hurt and go straight to the wisdom. That's not how it works. But at some point, you have to make a choice. You have to decide, am I going to let this wound define my story? Or am I going to let it become a chapter in a much larger, more beautiful story? Sometimes wounds come from betrayal by people we trusted. A few years ago, someone very close to me, someone I had considered family, betrayed my trust in a significant way. The hurt was devastating. I felt like I couldn't trust anyone anymore. I felt like a fool for having been so open, so vulnerable. But as I worked through that pain, I realized that their betrayal said nothing about my worth and everything about their character. That wound taught me to trust my intuition better. I had actually had red flags about this person that I had chosen to ignore. It taught me that being open and trusting isn't naive, it's brave. And it taught me that some people will disappoint you, but that doesn't mean everyone will. That wisdom made me more discerning without making me cynical. It made me more careful without making me closed off. Here's what I've learned about turning wounds into wisdom. First, you have to acknowledge the wound. You can't heal what you won't feel. Don't minimize your pain. Don't compare it to others' pain. Don't rush through it. Second, you have to take responsibility for your healing. Other people might have caused the wound, but only you can heal it. That doesn't mean excusing their behavior, but it means taking your power back. Third, you have to look for the lesson. What is this experience trying to teach you? How can it make you stronger, wiser, more compassionate? Sometimes the lessons are about boundaries. Sometimes they're about self-worth. Sometimes they're about forgiveness. Fourth, you have to use that wisdom to help others. When you've healed from something, you become uniquely qualified to help others who are going through similar struggles. Your pain becomes your purpose. When I speak to young girls who are being bullied, I can speak from experience. When I talk to actors who are facing discrimination, I understand their struggle intimately. When I mentor young women who are afraid to take risks, I know that fear because I've felt it. Your wounds, when transformed into wisdom, become your superpowers. They become the very things that allow you to connect with others, to serve others, to make a difference in the world. But remember, healing isn't linear. There will be days when old wounds ache, when triggers catch you off guard, when you feel like you're back at square one. That's normal, that's human. Be patient with yourself. Be gentle with your healing process. And sometimes, turning wounds into wisdom means forgiving people who haven't asked for forgiveness, not because they deserve it, but because you deserve peace. It means choosing to release resentment, not because what happened was okay, but because holding on to anger is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to get sick. So, rule number 4, turn your wounds into wisdom. Feel your pain fully, heal intentionally, and then use what you've learned to make yourself and the world better. Your scars are proof of your strength. Your healing is proof of your power. and your wisdom can become a gift to others who are still hurting. And finally, rule number 5, define success on your own terms. This might be the most important rule of all, because if you don't define success for yourself, the world will define it for you, and the world's definition might have nothing to do with what actually makes you happy, fulfilled, or aligned with your values. When I was growing up, success was defined very clearly for me. Good grades, stable job, marriage, children in that order. There was a template, and I was expected to follow it. And for a long time, I tried to fit into that template, even when it didn't feel right for me. But as I grew older, I realized that following someone else's definition of success was a recipe for emptiness. You can achieve everything the world tells you to achieve and still feel unfulfilled if those achievements don't align with who you truly are and what you truly value. So I started defining success differently. Success for me became about impact, authenticity, growth, and joy. It became about using my platform to create positive change, about staying true to my values even when it was difficult, about continuously learning and evolving, and about finding genuine happiness in my daily life. This redefinition changed everything. Suddenly, projects that looked successful on paper but didn't align with my values were no longer appealing. Opportunities that would make me money but wouldn't make me proud were no longer worth pursuing. When I started my production company, people asked me why I was complicating my life. I was already successful as an actor. Why take on the additional challenges of being a producer? But producing allowed me to tell stories I cared about, to create opportunities for other underrepresented voices, to have creative control over my work. That aligned with my definition of success, even if it didn't align with others' expectations. I think about Malala, whose definition of success isn't about personal achievement, but about creating educational opportunities for girls around the world. Or Michelle Obama, who has used her platform not just for personal gain, but to advocate for causes she believes in. Your definition of success might be completely different from mine, and that's exactly as it should be. Maybe success for you is building a family business that employs people in your community. Maybe it's becoming a teacher who inspires young minds. Maybe it's traveling the world and writing about your experiences. Maybe it's starting a nonprofit that addresses a cause you care about. Maybe it's raising children who are kind and confident. Maybe it's all of the above. But here's what's crucial. Your definition of success needs to be authentic to you, not impressive to others. I've met people who achieved everything they thought they wanted, the prestigious job, the big house, the social status, only to realize they were living someone else's dream, not their own. I've also met people who, by conventional standards, might not seem successful, but who are deeply fulfilled because they're living according to their own values and priorities. Defining success on your own terms also means being willing to change that definition as you grow and evolve. What success looked like for me at 25 is different from what it looks like for me now. My priorities have shifted, my values have deepened, my understanding of what brings me joy has evolved. When I was younger, I thought success meant working all the time, saying yes to every opportunity, proving myself constantly. Now, I understand that success also includes setting boundaries, making time for relationships, prioritizing my mental and physical health, and being selective about how I spend my energy. This evolution in my definition of success has made me more effective, not less. It's made me more creative, more focused, more fulfilled. It's allowed me to show up as my best self in all areas of my life. But defining success on your own terms can be challenging, especially when you're surrounded by people who have different definitions. There will be pressure to pursue paths that don't align with your values. There will be judgment when you make choices that others don't understand. There will be moments when you question whether you're making the right decisions. In those moments, I want you to remember this: you are the only one who has to live your life. You are the only one who knows what makes you come alive, what brings you peace, what aligns with your deepest values. Trust yourself. I remember when I decided to speak out about pay equity in Hollywood, some people advised me against it. Don't rock the boat, they said. You're doing well. Why risk it? But speaking up about issues I cared about was part of my definition of success. I couldn't be truly successful in my own eyes if I was silent about injustices I witnessed. Defining success on your own terms also means celebrating your victories, even when they don't look like what others expect. Maybe you didn't get the promotion, but you stood up for yourself in a difficult conversation. Maybe your business isn't profitable yet, but you're building something meaningful. Maybe you're not where you thought you'd be at this age, but you're exactly where you need to be for your growth. And sometimes defining success on your own terms means being willing to disappoint people, including people you care about. It means choosing your own path, even when others think you should choose differently. It means trusting your inner compass, even when it points in a direction others can't see. Your parents might have wanted you to be a doctor, but maybe you're meant to be an artist. Your friends might think you should focus on making money, but maybe you're called to do work that serves others. Your community might expect you to follow tradition, but maybe you're meant to create new possibilities. This doesn't mean being reckless or dismissive of others' perspectives. It means gathering input, considering advice, and then making decisions that honor who you truly are and what you truly want to create in this world. One of the questions I ask myself regularly is, if I knew I couldn't fail, what would I do? And then, if I knew no one would judge me, what would I choose? These questions help me tap into my authentic desires, separate from fear and external expectations. Remember, there is no one right way to live a life. There is no universal definition of success that applies to everyone. Your job is not to live up to someone else's expectations. Your job is to become the fullest, truest, most authentic version of yourself. So rule number 5, define success on your own terms. Get clear on what matters most to you, what brings you alive, what aligns with your values, and then have the courage to pursue that definition of success, even when it looks different from what others expect. As I stand here with you tonight, looking out at all of your faces, I see so much potential, so much power, so much possibility. But more than anything, I see your uniqueness. Each of you has a combination of talents, experiences, perspectives, and dreams that has never existed before and will never exist again. That's not just beautiful, that's powerful. The world needs what you have to offer, not a watered-down version of yourself that fits into someone else's expectations, but the full, authentic, powerful version of who you are meant to be. Let me leave you with this. A few months ago, I was in a small village in India working on a project with my foundation. I met a young girl, maybe 14 years old, who walked 2 hours each way to get to school every day. When I asked her why, when it would be so much easier to stay home and help her family, she looked at me with these fierce, determined eyes and said, "Because I have dreams that are bigger than my circumstances." That girl embodies everything I've talked about tonight. She owns her story. She's not letting her circumstances define her possibilities. She's willing to fail forward. She faces obstacles every day, but keeps moving toward her goals. She's building her village. She told me about the teachers who encourage her and the friends who study with her. She's turning her challenges into wisdom. Her difficult journey to school has made her value education even more deeply. And she's defining success on her own terms. She's not letting anyone else's limitations become her own. You have that same power within you. You have that same fierce determination, that same ability to rise above your circumstances, that same capacity to create the life you envision for yourself. But remember, strength isn't about being perfect. It's not about never feeling afraid, never making mistakes, never facing setbacks. Strength is about feeling the fear and moving forward anyway. It's about making mistakes and learning from them. It's about facing setbacks and finding ways to rise again. Strength is about being vulnerable when it serves you, about asking for help when you need it, about admitting when you don't know something. Strength is about being kind to others and to yourself. Strength is about using your power not just to elevate yourself, but to lift others up along the way. As you leave here tonight, I want you to make a commitment to yourself. Commit to owning your story, to failing forward, to building your village while being willing to walk alone when necessary, to turning your wounds into wisdom, and to defining success on your own terms. But more than that, commit to believing in yourself. Commit to trusting your voice, your vision, your value. Commit to taking up space in rooms where you're the only one who looks like you or sounds like you or comes from where you come from. Commit to speaking up when you see injustice, to standing up for yourself and others, to using your talents and privileges to make a difference. The world is waiting for what you have to offer. Not tomorrow, not when you're more ready, not when you have more confidence or more experience or more resources. The world is waiting for you now, exactly as you are, with exactly what you have. You are stronger than you know, braver than you feel, and more powerful than you can imagine. You have everything within you right now to create the life you want and to make the impact you're meant to make. So go out there and show the world what a strong girl looks like. Show them what unstoppable confidence and power look like when they're wrapped up in authenticity, compassion, and purpose. The stage is yours. The world is yours. Your time is now. Thank you, and remember, you've got this, and I've got your back. Priyanka pauses, smiling warmly at the audience as applause fills the auditorium. She raises her hand in acknowledgement, takes a deep breath, and exits the stage with the same confidence she entered with, leaving the audience inspired and empowered.